and welcome to Hilton Head Fishing Adventures. My name is Captain Charlie Beaton, and today we're going to be filming part 2 of 2 on basic fly tying techniques. For this episode, we're going to take a more in-depth look at some of the materials and tools that you would be using around the fly room. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, the first thing that we need to do when we're going to build a fly is we need to come up with some kind of a plan. The first thing that I like to do is I'll generally consult one of my pattern books. I'll go through the book, I'll find a fly that I want to tie, and the nice thing about these books is that they're going to give you not only pictures of what the fly should look like when it's done, but they're going to give you the recipe on how to tie the fly to include the materials that you're going to need. Once I know what fly I want to tie, I know the materials, I'll go ahead and I'll pull out my materials, I'll figure out what colors I want and so forth, and I'll lay everything out on my workbench. From there, I'll go ahead and I'll choose a hook, and we need to go ahead and we need to load this hook up into the vise. To do this, what we do is, you see the round curved part of the hook? We want to put that right in the jaws of the hook and pull down on the lever here. We want to make sure this hook is secured nice and tight within the vise, and generally I like my hook shank to lay parallel to my workbench, which gives me a reference point to work off of. From there, we need to go ahead and load our thread into our bobbin. To do this, we just take the thread cartridge, we put it in our bobbin like this, let's put some tension on it, and then we need to get the thread itself through the tip. I've got a little trick here I'm going to show you. I've got some 15-pound monofilament here. I've put a loop in it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that looped end and I'm going to push it through the tip of the bobbin so that it sticks out like so. From here, we take our thread, we push it through that big loop, and then pull it through the tip. Now our bobbin's loaded up. From here, what we need to do is we need to anchor our thread down to our hook. We need to decide first, do we want to start at the front or do we want to start at the back? All recipes are different, and that's going to depend on the fly that you're tying. But generally, to anchor the thread down to the hook, just pull the thread parallel onto the hook and start wrapping the thread over top of itself. Just like that. Once you get 10 or 12 wraps, you should be set. Clip off the tag end, and you're ready to go. Next, let's go ahead and start building a couple of flies. Alright guys, one of the first things that I usually think about when I'm tying my flies is what kind of flash I'm going to put in them. The flash just basically gives the fly a little bit of sparkle or an attractant for the fish. It comes in a lot of different forms. For example, this crystal flash here. I've got some wing flash. Or to start with, I've got a little bit of mylar ribbing or mylar braid. This stuff right here is pretty easy to use. It's simply anchor it down to the hook here, and what it does really is it gives the hook a little bit of bulk, and it will also camouflage that hook for you some. Once I get it anchored down, it's real simple. We simply just wrap it around the hook like so. And then tie it off. Once we get it tied off, we'll clip off the tag, and you'll notice I added a little bit of color to my hook. Say, for example, that I want to add a little bit of a flash to one of my tails. I might use this crystal flash. I'll start it at the back of the hook. I'll pull off a little bit of crystal flash here. You don't need a lot, maybe 8 or 10 strands. We'll clip it. And a little trick here that I like to use is I'll figure out about where the middle of it is, and I'll actually double the crystal flash around my thread. Once it's doubled around, all you need to do is to lay it on the top of your hook and then anchor it down with the thread. So now I have some flash here, for example, that may go into my tail material. From here, I could add a little bit of excess material. For example, I've got some synthetics here. I might add that over top of the flash. And you'll notice what I get here, as that synthetic moves through the water, the flash is going to move along with it and then put off some sparkle, some attractant. Another flash that we use quite a bit is this wing flash. And it's just as the name implies. It usually goes on the wings or on the body of the fly. For the most part, all this flash is about the same. It all does the same thing. Clip a little bit of that off. And say that I wanted to put a little bit of flash onto the body of a fly. I can just lay it along the side here. Kind of wrap it on. Even it out. I can wrap a little bit along the other side of the body. And for the most part, whether it's flash or materials, we always want to make sure that everything's symmetrical. We put the same amount of material on the left or right, and in some cases even the top and bottom. Otherwise, what happens if I have a real big amount of material or bulk on one side, when I go to strip that fly, it's generally not going to track straight. It's going to want to track to one side or another. Alright, so you can see here I've added a little bit of flash to the fly. We'll clip it up, clip it down a little bit, sort of even it out. And that's generally how we're going to add our flash. Next, let's go ahead and talk about a few more materials that we might use while we're tying our flies. Alright guys, with materials, let's go ahead and start looking at some of the natural materials that we have to tie flies with. For today, I've got some zonker strips, bucktail, some hackle, which would be feathers, and some marabou. Let's start with these zonker strips. These things are really nice. They flow really nice in the water. They put off a lot of action. You can add a little bit of sparkle to them, get some good movement in the water. The main place that I'm going to use my zonker strips is in the tail. It's definitely going to be in the tail. They're real easy to work with. You cut off whatever length that you want. You place them on the top of the hook and then tie them down. And that's basically about it with the zonker strips. I mean, they're real easy. Another material that does something real similar to zonker strips is going to be your marabou material. And I actually use marabou a lot in quite a number of my flies. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of that. Get this guy off here. This is going to be your marabou. Comes in a lot of different colors, as do all these materials. Pick through here and find a nice plume. There we go. Nice piece of marabou. You'll notice this stuff's real fluffy. It's a real big, kind of difficult to work with. A lot of times when I'm working with it, what I'll do is I'll sort of moisten it down a little bit just to make it a little easier to work with. But it also kind of shows you what this is going to look like when it gets in the water, which is really the key when we're tying these flies. We want to think about what these flies are going to look like and how they're going to move once they get in the water. Once again, this marabou works real nice as a tail material. I can just attach it to the back of the hook. I can clip off this excess and I'd have a little bit of a tail material. The other place that you might use it is I might take just a little tip of this, maybe put it in for a throat, a red throat, and so forth. You'll find a lot of uses for marabou. The thing that you got to remember about this stuff is that it's super supple. It's going to move and it's going to flow real nice in the water. You actually don't even need to strip the marabou. If you've got a little bit of current, the current will actually wave it around for you. So we've got some marabou on there. Good material. Another material that we use quite a bit is going to be these hackles. Basically just feathers. They come in all different sizes. You see I got small ones on the bottom. I've got the big ones up top. See, I'm going to tie a fly on this hook here. This hook's about this long. I generally like for my the point of my hook to be right in about the middle of my flies. So you'll notice that this fly is about this long. My hook's right in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig through here and I'm going to find some hackle that basically matches about that size. I pulled off a couple of pieces here and I'm just going to strip off the back edge of it. For this particular application, we're going to make somewhat of a tail. We're going to make a bait fish. But you can do a lot of different things with hackle. But you'll notice here, you see how it starts thick and it kind of tapers down thin? I can take these and I can place them on my fly, and I'm going to put these on the outer edges, the left and right edges of the hook rather than on top. I'm just going to wrap them onto the hook. And you'll notice what I get now. I'm starting to build up somewhat of a body and a tail, something that's going to be, by the time it's said and done, we want a thin head, thick body, and then tapering back out thin to the back. But that's something that you can do with hackle. Another thing that you might do with some of your hackles is you may wrap it around the hook to build up some body. Here once again, I'm just going to clip this down a little bit. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie this feather onto the hook. Bring this back around. And you'll notice once I start wrapping the feathers around the hook, pull that out a little bit, they're creating what may look like legs. They may look like a if you're tying a caterpillar, they may look like a caterpillar, or shrimp legs, and so forth. They can also just generally build up a body for you in most of your saltwater flies. Other applications that you'll find for your feathers, you can actually take them, pull them back like this, maybe clip off a little bit of the front of them. And what does this look like? We can glue these down and you're going to end up with crab claws. A lot of different things that you can come up with to use your feathers for. Another natural material that you're going to be using a whole lot in the fly room is going to be your bucktail. We use bucktail for a lot of different things. All you need to do to work with this stuff is just to find a nice patch of it. We'll get the amount of material that we want, cut it. And you can use this actually for tail material as well, but a lot of times what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to start it up a little bit further towards the front, and I'm going to move it around so that it sits all over the hook. I want it evenly distributed all the way around the hook before I wrap it down. And we're going to make a couple of loose wraps to start, and then as we go forward we're going to tighten up our wraps a little bit. The reason you don't want to make tight wraps to begin with is if you start with tight wraps, this material is going to want to kick out on you, and what we want it to do is we want it to lay down fairly tight to the hook. Once I've got it secured, I can come in with my scissors and I can start chopping off some of this excess. We're just going to trim it down. Once I get it trimmed down about how I want it, I can go ahead and start tapering it in. And you'll notice here, I mean, these are just techniques. We're not really tying up a full fly right now, but you can see I'm starting to build up somewhat of a body. Maybe I can add, if I wanted to make a bigger, bulkier fly, I can continue to add bucktail to that, and so forth. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the different synthetic materials that we might use when we're tying our flies. Alright guys, right now we're going to look at a couple of the synthetic materials that you may use to tie flies. Basically the difference between the synthetics and the naturals is that your natural materials are going to be materials that came off of an animal, say a deer, or a chicken, or so forth, and then they're going to dye them for the different colors. Synthetics are going to be your man-made materials. In general, I'll usually use a mix of synthetics and naturals in most of my flies. But for today, we're just going to look at them in pieces. There's a lot of different synthetics out on the market. For today, we're just going to take a look at using the slinky fiber. Pretty neat stuff. It basically imitates bucktail, but you'll notice it's easier to work with because it's all uniform. And it comes in a little bit longer pieces, so you can make longer flies, or you can just sort of trim it down where you need it to be. So say for example, for this particular fly that I want to build up a little bit of a body and a tail, I might take a little bit of my my fiber here and sort of pull the tail out a little bit so that we get somewhat of a bulkier center and a thinner back. I may start building up a little bit of body here. I'm going to get that evenly distributed all the way around the hook, just like we did with our bucktail. And And then I'm going to clip off the excess, and we'll hold that for a moment. Make sure that's good and secure. A lot of times I'll take a little bit of Zap-A-Gap, just place it there, and make sure that nothing comes loose on me. But you'll notice here we're starting to form a little bit of shape. Once again, pull this back a little bit, pull some of these fibers out so they're unevenly distributed. And we'll move forward just a little bit. And we'll do the same thing. We'll distribute this around the hook. And I'll wrap it down. Clip off the excess. And tie it down. And you can keep doing this until you get the shape that you want, until you get the length that you want, until you get however you want it to be. If I, for whatever reason, made this a little bit too long, I want to trim it down, I can come in here with my scissors, start trimming it a little bit at an angle, trim off some of that excess, and so forth, just to sort of shape the materials to make them what I want them to be. But most part, these synthetics are real easy to work with. Another material that's synthetic that we use a lot is this S-TAZ. This S-TAZ, it almost looks like something you'd find at the Christmas store. All we need to use this, it comes on a string. I'm simply going to place it on the hook where I want it to start. We'll bring our wrap back to the front. And I'm just simply going to wrap this stuff around the hook. And then tie it off. And you'll notice how easy that was. I just created a little bit of a bulk or a little bit of a body that can, serve as a lot of things. This could be a shrimp, this could be a crab, this could, depending on how you strip it, it could even be a bait fish. Next, let's go ahead and look at some of the eyes and how to attach the eyeballs that we would put on some of these different flies. Alright guys, for a lot of the flies that we tie, we're probably going to want to add some kind of an eye to it. Eyes have different reasons. For example, I've got these little doll eyes right here. This more or less just looks nice. It's going to give the fly a nice presentation. They're real easy to put on. All you need to do, they've got the flat back. You want to put some epoxy or some glue on the back of them, and then stick them down onto your fly and let it dry. Once it's dry, a lot of times I'll come back and I'll even spread a little more epoxy over it to keep it from coming off. They're not too bad. They're very lightweight. Another eye that we use a lot are these dumbbell eyes. These little tiny dumbbell eyes, and they come in all different sizes. With the different size dumbbell eyes, the fly is going to sink faster or slower. They're pretty easy to attach. All we need to do with these is put them on the top of the hook, wherever we want them, and start wrapping the thread over them. You'll notice when I put that first wrap of thread, it sort of kicked it to the side. So what I want to do here is I want to do figure eights back and forth over these eyes to attach them and to make sure that they're sitting centered down on the hook. They're not kicked off to one side. Once we get them hard attached, then we can cover them up with some sort of material. A moment ago we had some of this S-TAZ. What I might do here is pull this S-TAZ right over the eyes, and that sort of covered them up and got them on the inside. And this is a fly that we can actually use right here. This would be a good little redfish fly, actually. It actually, for the most part, it would work somewhat like a jig. To finish our flies, what we want to do is we'll clip off any little excess near the eye of the hook here. And then we just want to whip finish it. All I'm doing here is just making a number of wraps to finish it. Generally, I like to have a little bit of a cone shape in the front of my fly. Just makes it look a little bit better. Clip off a little more excess. We'll finish with the whip. And a lot of times, there's all kinds of different tools that you can use to finish off your wraps. A lot of times, I just do a couple of half hitches, and just make a loop and wrap it once, twice, and 3 times. All that's going to do is just hold the thread in place temporarily. If I tried to fish with this fly as is, those those loose whip finishes or those half hitches would actually just come loose. So what we need to do is we need to put a little bit of head cement on them. And all my flies I put head cement. And what that does is that seals the threads and keeps them from unraveling. And that's really about it. What we'll do with this guy, we'll put him in the drying rack, let him dry out, and we'll take him out and go do a little bit of fishing. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this presentation. I thank you all for watching, and until next time, catch 'em up.